All right. Should I go ahead and get started?
I'll do a quick intro and hand
Okay.
it off to you for you to give your quick talk. And we'll let it be live for a little bit. Yeah, like 3 seconds. Yeah. Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, there you to this refresh. Hello, everybody. My name is Storm Hughes. Welcome to the Society of Play Games Adjacent Careers Talk. Tonight we will have 4 speakers from our local, collective to give some talks about game development and their careers and how sometimes they might be opposing, but how sometimes they aren't. Um, I will be speaking tonight along with one of the organizers, Ian Walker, another one of the organizers, Hope Nasser, and a good old buddy, pal, friendo of mine, Chris Walker. Um, each talk will be at most 15 minutes, hopefully 10. And then after that, you're free to hop in our Discord and mingle with anybody who's giving a talk and ask anybody questions that you have about their careers, their career paths, or the work they do specifically. We're going to start off with Ian Walker, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Hello. It doesn't have my correct camera source. I've been streaming a lot. Hang on. I'll fix this real quick. No, I'm not. Webcam's not plugged in. All right, we're doing this with no video. So anyway, yeah, my name's Ian Walker. I just kind of wanted. I've done a lot of things in the industry that are not necessarily games, but have been related to my game dev skills. And so kind of the way I wanted to give my talk is to just kind of give a rundown of like my career up until now, to kind of show you how much different stuff you can do with a game dev skill set. So going all the way back to like some of my first paid work, I guess I should preface by saying I'm like self-taught and everything. Uh, I don't really have any education in game dev. I just kind of taught myself to do it, and I also taught myself to do electronics. Just like I did a little bit in high school, and then watched a lot of YouTube, and just kind of like read some books and learned how to do it. Uh, and I basically got into the industry by coming to DSOP and doing a lot of game jams and meeting people. So like the first kind of paid gig I got was doing some stuff for the video game museum, and it really wasn't making games. I made a couple of exhibits there, and I got that gig because I had done some a game jam with Squirrel where I brought some electronics and we made like custom controller stuff, and he knew the people that were putting together the museum, so he recommended me, and that's kind of how those things go. But so one of the exhibits I made was about the history of online gaming, and they wanted like this big LED strip that like shot across the room whenever you typed in a like a little chat box that connected with another chat box across the way. So like I just wrote a little Unity program that was just a little chat room and interfaced that with an Arduino that would control these LEDs. And that was just like I guess it's good to have a skill set like that in this kind of industry, because normally they'd have to hire a couple different people to work on that, but with me they could just be like, oh, you know how to do the whole thing, so here you go. uh I think that's going to be a running thing in my career, is just like being able to do all this kind of different stuff. Maybe not being a specialist in any of them, but it's a skill set that can kind of work together. It's good to branch out. Also, for them, I made this pixel art exhibit that was just a big old touchscreen. It was like a touchscreen TV, and they wanted to be able to draw pixel art, so I just whipped up a quick little thing for them. And that was one of those things where it was just, hey, since I already worked with them, they knew I could do this kind of stuff, so I went ahead and did it. Um, that eventually led up to me doing some startup work, and then getting hired at the company I'm currently working with. It's called From the Future. And when I got hired on there, they were looking for game developers, but they had gotten a partnership with the city of Denton to make a booth at South by Southwest. So I got hired on to start working on this, and we made this game called Magician's Dilemma, where it's just like a VR game and it's like an escape room. But the twist is that we built this big wooden rack with a chain and a big belt buckle that wraps around you. So we would actually strap people in, and you have this VR headset on, and the buckle had a little LED screen on it that was connected to the app with Bluetooth. So whenever you escaped it, it would let you free. And that's another one of those things where, because of my last job, I was able to just be like, hey, I know how to make games, but I also know this other stuff. And so it seemed like a really easy thing to just put together. Um, and so I've been with this company for a while, and we've actually had to kind of pivot away from games a bit because, as I'm sure all of you know, the games industry is pretty tough. We worked on some original IP for a while and put that out, and it was good, but it just didn't sell anything. So we kind of had to look for other ways to make money. And so I'm gonna just kind of go through some of the ways we've done that. A lot of it is through like either contract work from different companies or finding companies that want to do uh, kind of sort of game stuff. So like we do a lot of convention hall stuff. So one of the first ones we did that kind of relates to my skill set is we did this app for a company that does this is some kind of film that you put on windows that's like corporate scale. So you're buying it for a whole building, but they wanted a VR app that just plays a movie that's like, here's what the building looks like with the film on, and here's what it looks like with the film off. And then when the film is off, we have a big wall of heat lamps that lights up, and so the person in VR can't see the heat lamps, but they feel like the heat on their face. So for that job, I basically built a death ray out of heat lamps and hooked them all up to an app. And that was really fun. I had a stressful but funny story about that, where the circuit board I bought was rated for the voltage on those heat lamps, but it kind of didn't work. So like they had to literally smack it with a wrench to make it work whenever the pins would get stuck when those things turned on, because the lamps would just stay on, which is kind of scary because those things get hot. Um, and I think after that, my company had some contacts with some researchers from the university here that had gone on to do their own thing, but they got us a contract with a company that makes this treadmill called the Kine Assist, and it's like a treadmill for rehabilitation where it has a big robot arm that like grabs your waist and like takes weight off of you. So it's like for people with back problems that they're trying to recover from. And so they had us build a VR app where it would interface with the treadmill so it could like tell how fast you're walking and add resistance and stuff. And yeah, that was really cool to work on because the treadmill turns out it's actually really fun to play with because you can like push buttons on it and have it lift yourself off the ground, so it feels like you're floating. Um, but again, all of this came from just like having contacts with people and making working relationships, and I think being open to working on things that are kind of outside of just the stuff you would normally just make and drop on Steam. Um, there's a bunch of different convention stuff we did, and you can do this for non-VR too. But all this stuff we specialize in VR. There's a lot of companies out there that do advertising for anything, like that want to do convention booths and want to have interactive stuff. It's like a really big market. A lot of companies around Dallas do that, and so we've worked with a lot of them to make stuff that I can't say we've worked on, but uh, just because it's like contract under contract under contract. Uh, We have done some VR hotel visualization for a big hotel chain that like shows off their new stuff, and it's meant for like selling franchise hotels to clients. Um, and so that's a really easy like that hooks into a game dev really easily because it's just making environments and just making a simple app that you can walk through it with like some basic interaction. Um, and so the last couple things we've got into that are like kind of really our main focus right now is there's an autism therapy company in town that we've partnered with to make a therapy app for kids that are getting therapy for autism. And so we're working on this is actually like more gamey than a lot of stuff because a lot of it is just like toys you play with that the therapist can kind of guide them through. And so we have this whole multiplayer setup for uh I mean we're basically making a multiplayer game that's just like not really a game because it's made for therapy and like there's tools for the therapist on the other end to kind of spawn things into the world. But there's also gamey stuff. Like I'm making a little fishing game that's just like every fishing game that's in every non-fishing game you've ever played. And so that's a kind of really cool way to reuse this skill set in a way that is probably less risky than games. I think that's the thing that differentiates a lot of these. Because typically with games, you have to make the whole thing and then you get paid. With this stuff, there's people that are willing to pay you to do it, and so as a business, it can be a lot more sustainable. I imagine as freelance, it's the same. Uh, just because I think there's a lot more money in that. Uh, and then the other big thing we've gotten into recently as a company is construction. So we're 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 getting in on the training angle of VR. So we're trying to uh, make the case that a lot of these big tools that people need to train for, they like you can only train one person at a time on them or they're dangerous. So like if somebody's trying to work on high voltage equipment, like you can't the problem with actually training them is there's no sense of danger, but in VR you can just kill them. Like you can have somebody cross a wire and then it blows you up and it's like, hey, you would have just died if this was real. Whereas in training, like there's a lot of stuff like that, but we can provide a lot with our game skill set that they don't know they need until you tell them they need it. So like there's a lot of like we have, driving construction equipment around and you can like time them and challenge them and get all kinds of different metrics that it wouldn't make sense to do for all their training needs. Like eventually, of course, everybody needs to be trained on real equipment, but if you've got a classroom full of people, now you can give them all headsets and train them at once. So to kind of wrap up, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of places you can go to put this kind of skill set to use that are not just making games. And I mean, obviously, we're all interested in making games, but as a business, it doesn't always make sense to it. Games are a tough market, and so you can only fail so many times before you have to get real work. And this is just kind of a way that we found to get real work that's steady and still uses our skill set and still kind of fun. Um, so, I mean, the real way to get that is kind of it's going to be up to you, but you have to a lot of times you have to meet people and you have to tell them why they need it. Like you have to make the case for them that will open up their eyes and realize, oh yeah, we could do something with this skill set. Like, yeah, sure, here we'll give you some money. Um, anyway, I think that's about my time. So if we want to pass on, I don't know if we were doing questions after everybody goes or after each person goes.
Yeah, questions will be post the meeting. After
Okay.
I'm going to talk, if you're around in the Discord, people can ask you questions. If not, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I'll be around for that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that insight. Appreciate it. Um, Next up, we're going to have Hope, if you don't mind giving a talk second.
Yep, I'm all good. Just give me a second to
Yeah, of course.
stream my thing. One
Yeah.
sec.
as you do, unless your presentation already includes it, just giving us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do.
Hello. My name is Hope Nasser. I'm a recent UTD grad. I've got 6 months of ArcViz experience, all speed run, like learn stuff, pick stuff up on the way, and now I'm here to give it to you. So my whole talk is about pivoting from ArcViz. Oh,
Oh,
is
one
there
moment.
audio?
Hold on.
Okay.
Tyler, if you could move to her presentation for the stream.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
All right, all good?
You're pretty good.
Cool. So recent UTD grad, 6 months of ArcViz experience, and one sec.
Yeah, Storm, we're getting a bunch of static from you.
Okay. So my whole talk is on pivoting from ArcViz to games, which it isn't super complicated. There's not too much to it, but it can be really daunting when you don't know how it all works and how to go about it in general. So, quick disclaimer, I've worked with pre-rendered ArcViz. I am not at all familiar with optimization for AR or VR. So the primary thing that I'm going to be focusing on is on my own experience with pre-rendered environments. If you do really care about ArcViz and VR and AR and learning all of the optimization techniques like fake lighting, polylimits, etc., there are other ArcViz people here. I'm pretty sure Storm can at least talk on his experience with optimization because he's done a little bit with AR and VR. But yeah, not my thing. And shameless plug, my ArtStation, if you want to check it out. All right, so we have to start with what is ArcViz, right? ArcViz is short for architectural visualization, and it's the practice of converting information-packed architectural blueprints into easier to digest visuals for clients, advertising purposes, and communication. That's a lot. So how do we break this down? It's basically just taking the blueprints or even like a piece of tissue that's got sketched on it, a room, size, shape, whatever, taking that and then putting it into 3D. And it can be used from anything from interiors to like residentials to like residential places or commercial real estate to advertising and just like even being used to show architects what their product is going to look like. That way they can iterate on it and change it to be satisfactory to the client and the architect. There's a bunch of different types of ArcViz. There is external 3D visualization, which is focusing on the exterior view of a building. Usually it shows how this building can fit within the city or within a plot of land or how it looks while it's surrounded by all these other things. This can be even used by cities when they're trying to showcase like urban planning and urban sprawl and just trying to show how the building that they're going to build is going to fit into where it even be used to decide if people are going to buy a property. Like, is this the property that I want for this building? There's internal 3D renderings, and you kind of think of this as like staging a home for sale. Like, these are the clients that have a hotel or a like office building, and they want to show other clients who want to rent out the space what it could be like for them. What is it going to look like? You know, all buildings need investors, and so interiors are a great way to showcase what they're going to be purchasing so that they can see themselves in it. So your job as the artist is to stage it in a way that looks realistic so that they can picture themselves in it. There's virtual tours, which are AR, VR, or even pre-rendered animation that guide the client through the space. Some virtual tours even include audio, so it can really immerse the client in it rather than just being still shots. There's CG panoramas, which are 360 panorama still views of a space. These can be on like even web browsers. When you open a website and you can scroll through the camera and it's all like pre-rendered 3D digital, some of those are made by ArcViz artists. So the ArcViz Artist Toolkit. So a lot of these things sound pretty standard, right? The thing is, the big difference is how you approach everything, right? Like you want to be good at hard surface modeling, but this isn't because you're going to be modeling everything yourself. You're going to be doing what you need to or what's custom. And then most places will have libraries of assets that you can use, but your skills need to be able to fill in the gap. So you want to have a sufficient understanding of hard surface modeling so that you can do what you need to do and have it look realistic, whether it's building out walls, building out a warehouse, making a customized asset or a customized prop that a client wants. All of that is going to be required. You want it to be usable and pretty. With UVing, you want to have a relatively decent texel density, because when you're working on a project with multiple people, you want the consistency and the size of the textures to all be the same. As far as texturing, which is pretty important, you want to have a general understanding of PBR texturing or texturing for real life. And you don't have to make the textures 100% yourself. You don't have to go into Designer and make it from scratch, but you have to generally understand what it takes for a texture to look realistic or not. Like, if a plank of wood is too shiny or too rough, if it's got too many dents in it, if it just doesn't look real, it's going to take the client out of the like world that you've made for them. You want it to look as realistic as possible and not have anything stick out. So rather than trying to make, like, in games, you would consider it making like really interesting areas with a lot of super pop out compositions, like this building is really important. We want them to look at this. In ARCAs, you want it to look real, so you don't want people to notice things as much, if that makes sense. So yeah, texturing, realism, understanding how to make good textures or even source good textures like Substance Source, or how to use Quixel, or getting images from textures.com or whatever it's called now. It's probably changed. But sourcing your textures, or at least knowing how to make custom textures when you need to, is like a super good asset. The big one, a proficient understanding of lighting, light temperatures, global illumination, and potentially ray tracing. I say potentially ray tracing because it just depends on what studio you work at, what you're using, and how you're lighting with it. Like, different studios use different software, and so you may be ray tracing or you may be using baked light, but it's super important that you understand how to light a room and how lighting affects the mood of a room, because you're not just going to be affecting the color palettes that you're using and the paint on the walls, but clients will sometimes get super picky and they'll be like, oh, you know, the paint on the walls looks too warm, but it's all just coming from a light or something like that. So knowing how light temperatures change the mood and also can be applied in a good way within your rooms is super important. There's also a basic understanding of cinematics. Again, I worked with pre-rendered animations, so for those, you had to create your own cinematic compositions, figuring out how to move the camera in a way that doesn't jolt the viewer or like distract people, because you want to be able to show off the work that you worked on, but also make sure that it's like aesthetically pleasing at the same time. So there's different rules to cinematics and creating good compositions to make things look interesting. And then one of the most important things I think that no one warned me about was that architectural blueprints are actually super important, and they're really weird and hard to read if you don't know or have a guide to it. So for me, I kind of showed up on the job and was told to Google things, and that was kind of scary. But whenever you get the hang of it, architectural blueprints follow the same universal legend for the most part. So a material on one map is always going to be the same as a material on another map. They use the same symbols for it. And so once you have a good guide or like a good library of what a symbol means, you can easily just go through and like find it. Oh, cool, this type of window is this. And it makes it so much easier to read and understand what the architects are going for. And then finally, there's knowledge about current interior design and office trends. And so I had to look at a lot of offices, because you don't really realize that you don't know what an office looks like or what's in style for an office until someone asks you to make an office and you realize you've completely blanked on what you were supposed to be making or what it's supposed to look like. So I actually got really comfortable with different interior design websites. Like if you're making a residential, I believe like Houz, Houz, is a good website for that and like different like trends going on there. For offices, whenever I was doing a lot of that, there's Office Lovin' or something like that. It's very cliche, but like it gets the job done, you know? So always having those on hand, having references, just like in games, if you're going to make a piece of art, you need to have a reference for what it's kind of going to look like. You want to do the same thing for referencing real life, especially with ArcViz, just because like you want to see what looks good and has good design and good flow. And the easiest way to do that instead of becoming an interior designer is just finding other people's designs and incorporating them. So there's not a lot of differences. I think the biggest one is mostly just getting used to architectural blueprints and replicating them to scale. I had interesting encounters because you can get proportions right and you can think that it looks fine. But for some architects, because you're working with an architect, you're not just working with a client, there's a client's architect as well, because it's probably different studios that they're outsourcing to. You're going to be replicating it to scale digitally. And while an inch or an inch and a half difference in a design may not seem super big to you as a 3D artist, and client's probably not going to notice it, let's be honest. But the architect who made it is probably going to be upset or want it changed because it's their artistic vision and they came up with the thing that you're making, you know? So getting used to replicating things to scale and architectural blueprints was a big one for me. There's also cleanliness, which I didn't think would be as different as it is, but on the right side of the screen, there's two different examples. So one is from Call of Duty, and then one living space is one of my practice living spaces. You can see like a clear difference, even though they're interiors, the type of lighting is different. The amount of grunge is completely different. Things look newer on the top versus more used on the bottom. And while games emphasizes story, ArcViz emphasizes cleanliness in terms of clean renders, like not having noise in your renders, not having spots, but also having clean interiors that look shiny and new because that's what clients really enjoy. So less story and more aesthetics, you know? So where was my thought? Oh, like for example, I thought this one was really weird. It was one of my first projects, and I was using concrete on flooring. And so when you think of concrete materials on flooring, you naturally think of like it's matted, it's not super shiny. It might have a little bit of shine to it, but it's not going to be the most polished thing in the world. And I had another designer come up to me and be like, yes, your concrete needs to sparkle like it's tile, like it's brand new, straight, like glossy tile. And even though it doesn't make sense, it's what the client likes and that's what the client wants. So you do it. So there's like this weird thing that you have to adjust to. And then coming back to games after that makes it extra weird because you're so used to making everything shiny and clean that it's really weird to toss grime on things. So games, lots of grunge, lots of layers, lots of story, lots of depth. ArcViz, clean. Cleaner lines, cleaner materials, clean renders. And that's the main focus there. And then the third one, this one is just kind of an expected thing. So with games, you have more the expectation that it's, you know, one of 3 probably softwares that you use to model, whether it be Maya or Blender or 3ds Max, maybe. Then you have on the ArcViz side, because you're combining architects, engineers, and designers, you could have anything from Maya to 3ds Max to AutoCAD to Revit to SketchUp. There's so many different softwares that an employer could ask you to be familiar with. But I think the tried and true thing that I would recommend is having one software, knowing it in and out, and then once you're super, super, super comfortable with that software, it's so much easier to transition to a different one rather than knowing a little bit of every single one and confusing yourself. So generally, it's better to make sure that you're comfortable with that one software. Make sure whatever you do it well, and no one's going to question it. And then achieving photorealism. So number one thing, mastery of PBR materials. If it looks off, it's going to catch the viewer's eye. Like you want to have things look realistic in a scene. If something is blown out, if something is too matte, if it doesn't have enough of normal, it's gonna look off. And even though it's super small, it's just gonna catch your attention and you're gonna focus on it too much. Clean, but not too clean. This one's pretty interesting and it's fun. Oh, whoops. It's fun to get used to. So, as we discussed before, like games are much more dirty, grungy, story filled, right? But the thing is if you make one environment and you take a chair at a table and you just copy paste the chair and it's right next to each other, the same angle, the same positioning, it's just next to it, right? You're going to have a row of chairs all in the same angle and they're going to look weird. It's going to look off because your brain as a human being is not used to things being perfect. So we want it clean, but not perfect. You want it to have like a different angle, you know, moving props around, making the space feel lived in and having a little bit of like character to it because you want people to be able to envision what it's like to be there, you know? So having those slight changes and slight tweaks makes it so that your eyes don't get too skeptical or suspicious about anything that you're looking at, and it just makes it generally easier. Global illumination and ambient occlusion, super important. If you're going for realism, you got to have good lighting. You've got to have good details, you know? So having global illumination to provide the bounce lighting and then ambient occlusion to provide those contact shadows that you really need are so important. And so like, yeah, use it. Do lighting.
Coming up on time.
What is it?
Sorry, I said we're coming up on time.
Okay, cool. We're wrapping up. It's all good. I'm almost. And then small details make a difference. Beveling surfaces, well-placed baseboards, outlets, light switches, air vents. You don't notice them in real life, but whenever you don't see them there, things feel empty and it's weird. So make sure to look at the small things, even if it doesn't matter to you in the moment. Like adding those small things make a world come to life and like add that photorealism effect. So in conclusion, get comfortable with reading blueprints, look at tons of architecture, generally go for the jack of all trades 3D mindset, and then you guys can also internally monologue about whether or not it should be ArcViz or ArchViz. Yeah. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I know we kind of not last minute, but kind of asked you to throw something together for us. So I really appreciate you giving us some of your insights on ArcViz.
ArcViz, ArchViz, which one is it?
Arc-
We'll never know.
Next up, we have a good old buddy, old roommate of mine, Chris Waka. If you'd like to go ahead and throw up your talk for us.
Sure thing. Let me go ahead and share my screen. If Discord decides. There we go. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. Ooh, I need to. So, hi, my name is Chris Waka. I am a programmer by trade, but I also fill many different roles, like I assume most people here do, wear many different hats from time to time, depending on the project. However, currently what I do for a living is I work for a local company called Sector 5, where we do all kinds of different things, primarily marketing for client companies that, let's say, want to advertise some new product that they're coming out with, or put together a training simulation, some sort of experience like that, using VR, AR. Recently, things like online web video players, you name it. We do all kinds of different things. However, the thing that I wanted to talk about today is data visualization. And so in this talk, I'll talk a little bit about one of the projects that I worked with Sector 5 on, not last year, but the year before, where it was probably the most challenging project that I came across to date, I would say, in that the ask from the client in some sense could be considered pretty unrealistic. However, I'll get more into that as I go. But the way I kind of wanted to structure this talk is I wanted to kind of play around with, data visualization and then you and the client. And so what I did is I broke apart each section, and I'm going to talk about two specific things or aspects of each part. And I kind of did a pros cons approach, and I'll just kind of rattle off some information about those. So starting with external data, one of the things that can be kind of overwhelming or new to you whenever you get started with data visualization is just the sheer quantity of data that you have to deal with. Now this isn't always the case. However, for this specific project that I was working on, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but when it's in a text document, it's pretty bulky. But the text document that I was working on was formatted in JSON, and it alone was like 156K, and that was just like the bare minimum sample data that we could put together to run the experience. The real data that we would be getting pushed from the client was easily 10, maybe even 50 times that amount. And we needed to be able to build an experience that could process that data and then create a dynamic experience that made sense and visualized what the client's experience they wanted to present was. And so the pros of this kind of like quantity of data is that it can be very detailed and intricate, right? So you can really get into controlling a lot of specific things. You can have as much information about whatever you want as possible. So whenever you're creating some sort of visualization, you'll have access to pretty much everything you need. However, one of the cons that I came across was that it can actually be very time consuming. For example, putting this sample data set together, while it is a lot of copy paste when you're creating, here I was filling out flight information. It is a lot of copy paste. However, if you want to get realistic results when you're looking at a demonstration, you actually still need to manually go in and modify a lot of these values. And depending on how you structure your systems on the back end, it's possible that each one of these values means something and is important. And so that kind of ties into the next thing that I wanted to talk about, which is access. And what I mean by that is just working with a client to parse the data that they are going to give you and determine what is going to be relevant to the experience. One pro to this is that you get that exposure to, let's say, that specific client's API, or you learn how to deal with their systems, which may in the future be similar to other clients' systems or other things that you want to do personally in your own projects. For example, we needed to put together, we were working on a couple similar projects, and so what we wanted to do is we put together a class that we could have for each one of these projects, just a script that we could throw into each one that would dynamically go and grab this JSON data, depending on specific parameters that we pass in and things like that. So creating this tool was something that became useful for multiple other projects, and because of the way that the client wanted to get that data to us, we actually got exposure to a new system. However, the opposite side of that is it can also be a negative having to learn new APIs. Not on this project, but as an example, one of the projects that I had to work on before that was I had done a little bit of experience, or had a little bit of experience with JavaScript and some web development, stuff like that. And the project was, the client wanted to render out a 3D environment, but they wanted to do a panoramic web tour effectively. So it was a series of 360 images that they wanted a tour through. And there's some tools that are online that are available that make this basically put this together for you very easily. However, I had never done anything like that, so I had to actually go and do research and pick, what one I thought was going to be the best one. I had to do price comparisons, all these kinds of things, look at features that were available based off of what the client was actually requesting, as well as browser support is another thing that you might not think about. For specifically for applications, it could be devices, things like that. When you're thinking about putting your game together, you say, okay, well, am I going to support Android, iOS? Am I going to port it to Steam? Am I looking to try to get on consoles? Those same thoughts apply, but can more often be more restrictive when it comes to clients. For example, in that experience that I was talking about, the client wanted to support this 3D or wanted to support this panoramic tour on devices all the way back to an iPhone 4. And so for me, I have to go through and I had to find a place on, I didn't know anybody who even had a device like that, so we had to go online and find emulators, things like that, to be able to actually test this experience. But my point here being that it can be a positive experience getting that exposure to new systems. However, it can also be time consuming. And I apologize, by the way, for the quality of like my GIFs or my images or whatever. They're kind of blurry. So the next thing is visualization. And so in terms of visualization, the two aspects that I really want to talk about were design and practice. So design, what I mean by that is you get experience when it comes to design, and I touched on this a little bit with the previous topic of new tech. So in that previous example, I didn't necessarily get to work with something that was new. This panoramic viewer thing was not very flashy and bright. However, there's been multiple projects that I've worked for Sector 5 on that I've gotten to do, AR, VR, that kind of stuff. However, with this specific project, the data visualization one, we actually ran into an issue where the scope of the project was the client wanted to do a real-time dynamic render of a 3D environment. Let's say it was of an airport that effectively was a simulation. They wanted thousands of customers, employees, all walking around realistically to two destinations, boarding planes, disembarking planes, walking around this airport. They wanted the camera to have specific sequences set up, all of these things, and they wanted to do, transparencies. They wanted to support colorizing the employees and the customers and everything. They also wanted all of this to run in a WebGL player. And so I don't know how many of you have ever tried to do crowd simulation or anything like that. It's pretty beefy when you're trying to even do it on a real machine. They wanted this to run in a WebGL player and Firefox on some computer that they had. And so the new tech part of this that was really, really interesting was at the time, my lead engineer, he had come across a forum topic where someone working on a game doing crowd simulation, they had a similar problem. So what they ended up doing was they baked vertex animations into a texture, and then they wrote a custom shader to read that texture and apply the vertex translations to simulate animation. And so what my GIF here is showing is that exact procedure, right? So what we did is we actually, they didn't give their scripts or anything like that. So we had to kind of like brainstorm out how it worked, and we sat down and we came up with the idea of colorizing the vertices and going through and doing all of this, creating these scripts, and we had to go through bake it all for all the different models and everything. And so the new tech part of that was really, really exciting, and it's a story that I'll be able to share forever. However, it was a very steep learning curve. And so it took a lot of time. Sector 5, we had to ask for a lot of patience from them. And so moving forward from there, because of that, when it comes to visualization, you get a lot of a lot of practice, right? You get sometimes you have to, you know, sometimes you aren't having to simulate a functional city with traffic on a grid of LED panels, so you can really get familiar or well practiced with the stuff you know. Or you know, you can get better with organization. However, the cons are sometimes the client is going to ask for something that's going to be repetitive, right? Something that you've done over and over and over and over again. And so from there, it can get a bit tedious and boring, right? It's not always super exciting. Sorry, I want to kind of speed it up here. The last thing that I want to talk about was the relationship between you and the client. And so this was touched on a little bit before, was networking, right? So you get to you get to meet a whole bunch of new people when you're in these other industries, right? And your experience with other aspects of life really come into play, and they will help open up more doors for you and help you relate better with the client. You can I've known a couple people who have actually gotten jobs, who have started out doing games and then they migrated to like marketing, and now they work for the companies they were doing marketing stuff for. But you know, it just kind of all depends on what groove you find yourself in and things like that. However, the con to that can be client-facing interaction, right? So a lot of times, if there's a problem that's particularly hard or stressful, something like that, you know, it can be your job having to explain that to the client. For example, for this project that we got, we actually were given a document. It's a 127-page long design document for this experience. And as long as that is, you would think that it would cover everything. The first day that I sat down to read that, I wrote up a 5-page long list of questions, just questions about things that they hadn't answered in the document. And then at the end of the project, we actually found out that, you know, the project had actually gone way over budget. And then when we actually went and looked back through the thing, there was one sentence in that entire document that actually increased the scope of the work by an additional 3 months. So those kinds of problems are things that you have to deal with, you know, with the client. And so that kind of bleeds into implementation. For example, with this same project, you know, in that document, the client, they said, okay, we have these planes and we want everything to be realistic, you know, real scale. We want the distances to be, you know, as accurate as possible, but we want the vehicles and the people to move at realistic speeds, and the vehicles have to follow these safety procedures. We need the cones. You can see the cones there. We need the cones placed in these exact dimensions away from the plane. It needs to be accurate by our safety standards. And so from there, you run into the issue, okay, that's fine, you know, we can take the time to do this. And they say, okay, well, we want the planes to move at this speed and we want them to move this distance, but this is a timed experience and it has to last this long. And so then when you sit down and you look at it, you go, wait a second, they just gave me all 3 parts of a speed formula. And when you sit down and do the math, they don't add up, right? This is impossible, right? You gave me all parts. And so having to convey that to the client can be a hassle and can take time. And so sometimes you actually have to make those decisions based off of what the implied experience is. And so what we ended up doing was we said, okay, so what can the client measure? They can look at the distance, they can look at the time, you know, they know how long it's taking, but they don't have speedometers on these vehicles. They can't really tell. So as long as we don't make it look like, you know, the plane's driving, you know, taxiing at a million miles an hour, they're not really going to know, right? And so those kinds of things are hurdles that sometimes you have to overcome. And so that's kind of what I was talking about when I wrote here that clients can over-engineer, right? They can give you kind of a lot of extra things that you have to work through. So in summary, basically, like I said, there's when it comes to data visualization, there's a lot of things, and working with clients, there's a lot of things that are very positive and rewarding from those experiences. And there are a lot of things that you have to kind of just deal with and put up with. But it is very useful. I would say that I've learned a lot of things, and I think it's made me a better game developer. Yeah, and so with that, I think I will pass the mic off.
Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate that. Forgot to unmute in Discord and muted my mic. That's an anecdote that I've heard quite a lot that I feel like is useful being shared, and I really appreciate you taking the time to write me up a talk and share that with everyone. Next up, for the last speaker of the night, we have who is this? Storm Hughes. He's going to give a talk on real-time product visualization. So let me just send that up for him. Cool. Awesome. Are we good to go there? Let me double check and make sure everything is all set and ready. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you for being here, everyone. My name is Storm Hughes. I'll be giving my quick little talk on real-time product visualization. Subtitled, Oops, It's All UI. I'm just gonna go ahead and see if I can do this really quickly. I'm an indie game developer. I've been making games for 6 years now, Jesus. I've done game jams like crazy. I have a game on Steam, and you can follow me on Twitter at Storm Hughes. I make video game that's fun. Professionally, I'm a Unity contractor. I create or work on Unity apps for companies, typically under NDA. Sometimes it's under a company for NDA. So not only do they not know I worked on it, but no one knows no one can know I worked on it. A lot of times I do AR, VR, or regular 3D apps. And then if it's AR or VR, it's typically mobile. A lot of AR is on mobile devices. And then furthermore, because it's for companies, if it's mobile, it's for an iPad. Because you can buy a lot of those and set them out to everyone. Regardless of the client, you typically work, all the work I do typically falls under product visualization. So what is product? What's product viz for? It's usually for internal training or sales tools. So I have 2 examples. Company A has a new top of the line product that requires training for internal salespeople. So it's a new fancy, newfangled AR glasses that has 60 different buttons and 4 different settings. And so we create a tool that trains salespeople to understand how these products work. Or company B says that having a companion app would help drive sales. Typically business to business sales, not business to public. So my cat is having a great time. A salesperson at a company will go to another company with this like app that displays their product, and then they'll pitch it to a company that way. Why use Unity or other game engines? Unity is a game engine, and we talk about them as game engines, but one thing I found is that just saying it's a real-time render engine kind of boosts legitimacy in business conversations, but also it has a bunch of features that are built in with the engine. And it's really good for real-time dynamically loading in objects or doing interactivity. If you want a pre-rendered video, like these like car videos that like show what this new year's Honda Civic, you can just make a pre-rendered video and call it a day. You don't need to do that in Unity, but if they want people to open the doors, honk the horn, change the tires, crash 40 cars into each other, Unity or game engines are there for you. So if you want to do this kind of work, if you are a Unity dev or a game dev and you think, it's hard finding game contracts and I want to do this other kind of stuff, what do I need to do? What do I need to know how to do this? So the step 1 is interactivity, know how to make things interact with each other in Unity. Know the very basics of rendering and lighting, and then know how to do UI. Interactivity, so just know how to be able to move things in Unity, manipulate game objects about a scene. The goal is to give the user agency over the experience. If it's a pre-rendered video, they have no agency, but with Unity and making an application, it gives them the ability to manipulate the experience and also make it responsive. I put a screenshot of Blizzard's Hearthstone. If anybody's played Hearthstone, you can recall that you can, play the card game as you can, but you can also click on the environment. And when you click on the dirt, it has a little dirt puff. When you click on the catapult, it shoots something. Just the world is interactive and responsive, and that really boosts retention and engagement. Rendering and lighting, kind of a little bit as Hope has said in the beginning, these can be a job all by themselves. Some people's jobs it is to render things, and some people's jobs it is to light things. But all you need to know is that people typically want realism with their products. They don't want like a highly stylized fantasy version of the Ray-Bans they want to put on in AR. They want the Ray-Bans. So if you want to get into this, all you need to learn is have a good understanding of Unity materials and shaders. Not necessarily writing shaders, but understand which shaders you have available to you and what maps they need. Typically, you'll be provided with assets, but it's important that you tell the company what assets they'll need to give you. You don't want to be handed a roughness map and go, I don't know where this goes. The Unity default shader doesn't have a roughness setting or anything like that. And then pro tip: reflections make things look real. Raise ambient lighting in your scenes. Dark shadows are not flattering, and clients will not be happy. Unity's default lighting is very dark because video games like dark and dingy. Clients don't want dark and dingy; it makes things look bad. And then UI basics. So the very, very foundation of UI, kind of like a start screen, an end screen. Though if you're on mobile and typically iOS, that's a freebie because people just either leave apps open or swipe up and close the app. A settings menu to like turn on and off sound if you have that, and other app settings that you have if you want to like go into windowed mode or turn on or off bloom. Just kind of settings overall for your experience. Kind of basic stuff. And then there's more UI, custom tailored UI for your application. And this stuff kind of tells people how to use the app and how they can interact with the product. Typically, it's basic stuff like moving things about a scene, translating them, rotating them, scaling them, or UI that indicates that you can open doors, turn knobs, simple user interfaces that kind of let you interact with the experience. And then at the end, I also have like perhaps it's a UI that lets you change what product you're looking at or instantiate more products. Um, you know the kind of the meat of your application. And then there's more UI. These apps are made to teach people about products, even if it's internal or if it's a sales tool. That means there's a lot of copy. There's a lot of marketing words, a lot of specific phrases and passages and paragraphs of information about the product that they want people to know. That has to go somewhere. When you tap on the windshield of a car, there's going to be a paragraph about the windshield, about who made it, about all its bells and whistles, about every feature, and that just has to be somewhere. Another pro tip real quick, formalize your copy so you can create data structures to update existing fields. Don't have dozens of similar game object panels in your editor. Like don't have like every different window has a different game object that you turn on and off. That's cursed. Don't do that. Formalize your copy and update fields. That's just going to make it way better for you to manipulate later. And also you can have the client send you the data. One thing I didn't put on here, but I'm recalling, data entry is this is where most of your data entry happens. You spend all your time writing this UI and programming everything and making the data structures, and then they give you a short story about the product and you have to sit there and type it all up into your data structures. It's not fun, but you gotta do it. And then UI and its relationship to other UI. So the more panels you have, the more overhead is required to manage them. Controlling what panels can be accessed from other panels can be complicated. And having each panel be independent from each other makes this nearly impossible. So just create a manager that controls your UI, like have some sort of system that you use to activate and deactivate certain panels and let the app state kind of be dictated from that. I know a lot of people in the early game jam days, they just have like a solo button that just kind of exists by itself. And then that button opens up the next panel because it's designed to. But what happens if, you want to go back, or what happens if you want to skip ahead to, or what happens if you loop back around somehow, or people just navigate their way back in a circle. And then you have to modify that button, just having to dig into your complicated scene hierarchy and just keep in your head what panels go where is difficult if there's not a manager. And then also in UI, there's motion graphics. All that functionality must not only look good with the design that's been provided, but it needs to feel good when you're doing interactivity. While you are typically provided with assets and designs, people aren't typically going to ask you to be the UI designer and the animator. You're here just to make the experience. You still have to create the systems to animate these pages. Typically buttons will animate in from the side, panels will react upon touch. So you have to program that. You have to either use, depending if you use the Unity Animator system, if you're using Blueprints, if you're using Unreal's UMG system, or tweening panels about the screen. You still have to do that. It's your job to animate, even though someone's provided you with a XD file and telling you exactly how to animate it with what timing and easings. You still have to do that as labor. Don't forget to reset your UI back to the start positions, or else things will be lingering when you come back. Don't forget to, when you leave a page, reset it. And then as a bit of so takeaways. UI programming might not be the fun part of game dev. I know when I first started making video games, I boasted a lot of diegetic UI is the way of the future. It's really good game design. It makes the world feel real. And it's really just an excuse to not program user interfaces. It's not fun. There's a lot of UI, and especially when you're not a graphic designer, it's hard to make the assets to make the UI. But making the UI, it does pay. It's also the main way that users interact with your experience. So you can spend all of your effort into a really interesting interactive experience, and then the user interface sucks, and people look at their phone and go, "I don't know what this is, or how do I do the thing? How do I move?" Or they might not know that you can move. So you spent 2 weeks on this really awesome feature, and then no one knows that it existed, and no one ever touched it. So take pride in your UI. It will dominate your time. There's a lot of user interfaces to be made. Every experience requires some. Yes. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Cool. I tried to speed run my talk a little bit to make sure we got under 8 p.m. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming to the YouTube stream and to the Discord. For taking part and listening in on our game dev, games adjacent careers talk. I appreciate you all for being here. That'll be it for tonight. We don't have any more people coming up to speak. However, if you'd like to ask either me, Chris, Hope, or Ian any questions about our talks, you're free to hop in our Discord and join one of the various mingle rooms. From there, you can flag us down, hand wave, or shoot us DMs if the DMs are of the respective people are open. Thank you very much. Is there anything else any of the organizers would like to say before we dismiss the stream and say goodnight to everyone?
Thank you, everyone. Can I delete the room? It's my
No.
favorite thing.
No. Hey.
Okay, I will not then.
Please, I want to get rid of it. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
You.